In the early morning light of a medieval training ground, a knight stood alone with sword in hand, facing what looked like a crude wooden dummy. The figure was not a man, not a living opponent, but a stout wooden post buried in the earth, often topped with a block or crosspiece to mimic shoulders. It was called a Pell, and that simple post was the knight's greatest teacher. Every strike he practiced against it, every bead of sweat that landed in the dirt was a step closer to mastery of the battlefield. To the modern eye, the sight of an armored warrior wailing on a wooden log might seem absurd. Why not spar with other men? Why not hone one's skills in live combat instead? But the answer lies in understanding the relentless discipline of knighthood. The life of a knight was not all glory and chivalry. It was muscle memory, pain, repetition, and an obsession with perfection. And no training tool better embodied that journey than the humble Pell. The Pell was not just a post, it was the embodiment of 1,000 imagined enemies. For a young squire just beginning his path toward knighthood, the Pell was his first taste of combat. He would strike it again and again, not for minutes, but for hours, in scorching heat and bitter cold. The goal was simple, but brutal: build strength, precision, and endurance. Training with a Pell taught the knight to swing his sword with maximum force while maintaining control, strengthened his grip, honed his aim, and conditioned his entire body. And most of all, it taught him not to hesitate. Unlike sparring, which required a partner and often had rules, the Pell was always available. It never tired, never cried foul, and never pulled its punches. In return, it demanded everything. One could not cheat the Pell. If a knight's blow landed off target, the post offered no forgiveness. If his wrist faltered, the jolt of the impact would remind him instantly. And if his stance was wrong, he could feel his balance slip. The Pell became a silent critic, revealing every weakness. But there was something else the Pell offered. Something less tangible and far more valuable: confidence. With each successful strike, the knight reinforced his ability to fight. When the real battle came, when he faced steel rather than oak, he would not freeze. He had already fought 1,000 duels in his mind, every one of them against that unyielding wooden figure. And so his body moved as it had been trained to move. Reflex took over. Muscle remembered. There is also a psychological element to Pell training that cannot be ignored. War in the Middle Ages was terrifying. The chaos of battle, the screams, the unpredictability of your opponent's next move, all of it could shatter even the bravest heart. But by beating the Pell day after day, a knight prepared himself for that chaos. The repetition dulled the fear. The ritual of training became a kind of meditation, a rhythm that steadied the mind and silenced doubt. In many ways, the Pell was a tool for shaping not just the body, but the spirit. Historical accounts from the medieval period often speak of knights who trained with near-fanatical dedication. Some were said to strike the Pell 10,000 times in a single day. Whether those numbers were exaggerated or not, the message is clear. Knights believed that greatness was earned in private long before it was proven in public. The battlefield was merely the test. The real work was done alone, swinging a blade at an unfeeling post until arms ached and calluses bled. Pell training also helped develop one of the most vital skills in medieval combat: follow-through. A knight who struck an opponent could not afford to pause. Momentum had to carry him from one blow to the next. The Pell taught this rhythm. Knights would practice combinations, chaining moves together with fluidity, learning to recover quickly and prepare for the next attack without hesitation. Over time, their motions became smooth, economical, deadly. It is worth noting that Pell training was not limited to swordsmanship. Knights would sometimes train with maces, axes, or even practice grappling and shield strikes using the post. Some Pells were designed with arms or appendages to simulate limbs, allowing for more complex drills.
Ow.
This kind of training reflected the brutal reality of medieval warfare, where a knight might have to fight in close quarters with improvised weapons or wrestle his foe to the ground. The Pell became a stand-in for all these scenarios, offering a safe space to simulate the chaos of real combat. Interestingly, the value of Pell training extended beyond the noble class. Mercenaries, foot soldiers, and even peasants who had access to a sword could use a makeshift Pell to practice. A tree, a fence post, or a barrel might serve in place of a formal training dummy. In this way, The Pell became a democratizing force in medieval martial culture. Anyone with the will to train could beat the post and sharpen their skills, whether or not they wore armor or bore a title. The culture around Pell training reveals something important about medieval society. Knights were expected to be more than warriors. They were symbols of discipline, honor, and dedication. And that image was not built in tournaments or courts, but in solitude, sweat, and the relentless pursuit of mastery. Beating the Pell was a daily reminder that glory was not given. It was earned. Even the sound of Pell training had a purpose. The sharp crack of sword on wood echoed across the yard, a rhythm that other squires and knights could hear. It created a kind of music of war, a percussive reminder that somewhere someone was outworking you. That sound pushed others to pick up their weapons and train harder. In that way, Pell training became not only a personal discipline, but a communal one. Entire orders of knights might train together, their strikes timed and measured like a deadly dance. Of course, Pell training could not replace live combat. Sparring with a real opponent introduced variables that a wooden post could not. Timing, anticipation, reading an opponent's movements. These things required human interaction. But the Pell was the foundation. It prepared the knight for everything else. Without the basics drilled into muscle and bone, advanced techniques would crumble under pressure. Modern martial artists often speak of the value of shadowboxing, bag work, or kata forms practiced alone. With an emphasis on control and precision, Pell training was the medieval equivalent, was the knight's shadowboxing. And just as modern fighters rely on solitary drills to refine their form, so too did knights rely on the Pell to sharpen their edge. Even today, in historical European martial arts circles, practitioners still use Pells. They train with longswords, broadswords, and sabers, striking wooden or padded targets, much like their medieval counterparts. The tradition lives on because the lesson still holds true. It's built in repetition. Power comes from practice. And the quiet discipline of hitting a post again and again is what separates the average from the exceptional. There is something deeply human about the story of the knight and the Pell. It is a story of struggle, of persistence in the face of monotony, of choosing to do the hard thing when no one is watching. The Pell does not praise or scold. It just stands there, waiting. And the knight, day after day, meets it with steel. In the end, the wooden post was not the enemy. It was the test. And every time a knight raised his sword and struck it, he was not only training for battle, he was proving something to himself, that he could endure, that he could improve, that he was ready. And that brings us to the end of the story behind those relentless wooden posts. Might have looked strange at first, watching knights hammer away at something that couldn't fight back. But now you know the truth. Pell training was never about the post. It was about the knight. About building discipline when no one was watching, about sharpening both body and mind through sweat, repetition, and quiet determination. These knights didn't just wake up battle-ready. They earned every swing, every strike, every callus on their hands, by training in solitude, day after day. The bell never praised them. It never clapped. But it shaped them into warriors long before they stepped onto a real battlefield. And that kind of focus, that kind of self-mastery, is something we can all take with us. So if you're grinding away at your own version of the Pell, whatever that may be, just know you're not alone. Keep at it. You're not wasting time. You're building something. If you enjoyed this dive into medieval grit and training, don't forget to like, subscribe, and join us for more forgotten lessons from history. Until next time, keep striking, stay strong, and chase your own version of mastery.